The salt spray kissed my face as I gazed across the narrow channel at Osprey Island. Just a sliver of land really, an emerald jewel set against the turquoise of the Gulf. That's where my brother, Ben, had built his life. A cozy, weathered cottage overlooking the water, a haven from the mainland's relentless pace. He was a craftsman, a woodworker, his hands shaping driftwood and fallen branches into stunning works of art that whispered tales of the sea. We were close, Ben and I. He, the quiet artist, and me, the pragmatic problem solver. A bond forged in childhood, strengthened by shared secrets and unwavering support. The only link between Ben's sanctuary and the rest of the world was the old wooden bridge, affectionately nicknamed the Lifeline. It creaked and groaned with age, but it was sturdy, reliable, and absolutely essential. Ben needed it for supplies, for clients to visit his workshop, and for the occasional trip to the mainland. We all depended on it. But even paradise has its serpents. In this case, the Osprey Island Homeowners Association. A group of meticulously manicured lawns and pearl-clutching busybodies, obsessed with rules and regulations. Lately, their attention had been focused on the bridge. Whispers of disrepair, demands for costly renovations, thinly veiled threats of action. Little did we know how far they were willing to go. A storm was brewing, and it wasn't one the weather forecast had predicted. The lifeline wasn't just a structure of wood and steel, it was Ben's lifeline, quite literally. It was the artery that pumped lifeblood, in the form of groceries, art supplies, and the occasional pizza, to his secluded existence. Without it, Osprey Island was just that, an island, isolated and unreachable. I remember countless childhood adventures on that bridge. Fishing off the side, daring each other to peek through the gaps in the planks, the rhythmic thump-thump of tires a constant soundtrack. It had always been there, a comforting presence. Ben relied on the bridge for his livelihood. Clients often came to the island to commission pieces, drawn by the tranquility and the unique atmosphere that fueled his creativity. He also used it to transport his finished works to galleries on the mainland. Without the bridge, his business would crumble. The HOA's complaints had started subtly. Anonymous notes left on Ben's doorstep, citing unsightly repairs and potential safety hazards. Then came the official letters, filled with legal jargon and veiled threats. They demanded a structural inspection, followed by costly repairs that Ben simply couldn't afford. The HOA even suggested he replace the wooden planks with concrete, a suggestion that made Ben bristle. He saw the bridge as a part of the island's character, a testament to its history. Concrete, in his eyes, would be a sterile, soulless intrusion. The tension was palpable, a dark cloud gathering over our little slice of paradise. The HOA's demands weren't just about the bridge, they were about control. It was a power play disguised as concern for safety. Ben, fiercely independent and resistant to authority, refused to be bullied. He argued that the bridge had stood for decades, weathering storms and neglect, and that minor repairs were all that was needed. He even offered to do the work himself, using reclaimed wood and his own skills, but the HOA dismissed his offer with a condescending wave. The meetings became battlegrounds. Ben, outnumbered and outmaneuvered, fought tooth and nail against their proposals. He pointed out that the HOA's budget was flush with funds, yet they were nickel-and-diming him over essential repairs. He accused them of targeting him, of trying to force him out of the community. The petty disputes escalated. Ben's mailbox was vandalized. His trash cans were repeatedly knocked over. Anonymous complaints were filed about his unsightly wood piles and the noise from his workshop, even though he worked during reasonable hours. It was a campaign of harassment, designed to wear him down. I urged Ben to compromise, to find a middle ground. But he refused to back down. "They're not going to win, sis," he'd say, his jaw set with determination. "This isn't just about the bridge, it's about principle. They can't just steamroll over people." His stubbornness worried me, but I admired his courage. I knew this fight was consuming him, but I also knew he wouldn't give up without a fight. I received the call on a Tuesday morning. A neighbor, her voice laced with panic, "They're tearing it down, Sarah. They're actually tearing down the bridge." My blood ran cold. I raced to the mainland side of the channel, my heart pounding against my ribs. The sight that greeted me was surreal, horrifying. A massive crane loomed over the water, its metal jaws ripping chunks of wood from the bridge. The rhythmic crunch of destruction echoed across the water, a death knell for Ben's way of life. There was no warning, no notice, no attempt at communication. Just brute force, a blatant display of power. I tried calling Ben, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Panic clawed at my throat. Was he even aware of what was happening? Was he trapped on the island, watching his connection to the world being systematically destroyed? I screamed at the construction workers, demanding they stop, but they just shrugged and pointed to a clipboard-wielding man in a hard hat, presumably the project manager. He simply stated they were acting on the HOA's orders and had all the necessary permits. Permits. As if a piece of paper could justify this act of vandalism. I felt a surge of helpless rage. I had to get to Ben. I had to make sure he was okay. But the bridge was being dismantled before my eyes, leaving him stranded, alone, and vulnerable. The lifeline was being severed, and I was powerless to stop it. Days turned into an agonizing blur. Ben was effectively marooned. I finally managed to reach him by radio, a crackly, unreliable connection that offered little comfort. He was rationing his food, his voice strained with worry. He'd expected the HOA to be difficult, but never imagined they'd resort to something so drastic, so malicious. His supplies were dwindling. He had enough food for perhaps a week, maybe less. Water wasn't an immediate issue, he had a well, but it relied on electricity to pump, and his generator fuel was also running low. The isolation was taking its toll. He missed the simple things, a hot shower, a fresh cup of coffee, human contact. I tried everything to get help. I pleaded with the local authorities, the sheriff's department, even the Coast Guard. But they all gave me the same bureaucratic runaround. It was a civil matter, they said. The HOA had the permits, they said. They couldn't intervene, they said. Their indifference was infuriating. It felt like everyone was turning a blind eye to Ben's plight. Desperation gnawed at me. I considered renting a boat, but the channel was treacherous, and I had no experience navigating those waters. I even thought about swimming, a foolish idea given the distance and the strong currents. I felt utterly helpless, watching my brother slowly slip away, isolated and alone, while the world did nothing. The weight of responsibility pressed down on me, a crushing burden of guilt and fear. Seeing Ben's life reduced to crackling static on a radio spurred me into action. If the authorities wouldn't help, I would. I decided to investigate the HOA myself. I started by attending their meetings, meticulously taking notes, observing the power dynamics. I volunteered for committees, gaining access to internal documents and financial records. What I found was unsettling. The HOA's finances were a tangled mess. Funds earmarked for community improvements seemed to vanish without a trace. There were suspicious invoices, payments to shell corporations, and blatant conflicts of interest. The HOA president, a pompous man named Mr. Harrison, seemed to be living far beyond his means. I discovered that the bridge demolition project was far more expensive than initially stated, and the contract had been awarded to a company owned by Mr. Harrison's brother-in-law. The more I dug, the more dirt I uncovered. It was clear that the bridge wasn't just about safety, it was about money, about lining the pockets of a select few at the expense of the community. I spent hours poring over documents, piecing together the puzzle. I talked to other homeowners, gathering information, building a case. Many were hesitant to speak out, afraid of retaliation from the HOA. But some, emboldened by my investigation, shared their own stories of questionable dealings and intimidation tactics. The picture that emerged was one of corruption, greed, and abuse of power. And I was determined to expose it all. Armed with my evidence, I sought legal counsel. I found a sharp, determined lawyer named Ms. Evans, who specialized in HOA disputes. She was appalled by the HOA's actions and agreed to take our case. We filed a lawsuit against the HOA, demanding an immediate halt to the bridge demolition, the restoration of access to Osprey Island, and a full accounting of their finances. The legal battle was an uphill climb. The HOA, flush with funds pilfered from the community, hired a high-powered law firm that specialized in aggressive defense tactics. They filed motions to dismiss the case, claiming we lacked standing. They dragged their feet on providing documents, burying us in paperwork. Every step of the way, they threw up roadblocks, trying to wear us down and bleed us dry. The bureaucratic hurdles were infuriating. The legal system seemed designed to protect the powerful, not the vulnerable. We faced delays, continuances, and endless procedural challenges. Ms. Evans worked tirelessly, navigating the complex legal landscape, but it was a constant struggle. The HOA's lawyers also launched a smear campaign against Ben, painting him as an eccentric recluse who was neglecting the bridge and endangering the community. They even tried to subpoena his medical records, claiming he was mentally unstable. Their tactics were ruthless, designed to intimidate and discredit us. Despite the challenges, we refused to back down. Ben's life depended on it. The HOA's heavy-handed tactics and the blatant unfairness of Ben's situation didn't go unnoticed by everyone. Slowly, a sense of unease began to ripple through the Osprey Island community. People started whispering, questioning the HOA's motives, and expressing concern about the escalating conflict. Some homeowners, initially supportive of the HOA's efforts to improve the island, began to have second thoughts. They saw the demolition of the bridge as a drastic overreaction, a clear abuse of power. They started to wonder if the HOA was truly acting in the best interests of the community or if something more sinister was at play. I started receiving anonymous calls and emails, offering support and sharing information. People were afraid to speak out publicly, but they wanted to help in any way they could. They provided me with documents, shared their observations, and offered encouragement. The community was becoming increasingly divided. On one side were the staunch supporters of the HOA, the ones who benefited from their policies or were simply afraid to challenge the status quo. On the other side were those who were disillusioned, outraged by the HOA's actions, and determined to fight for justice. The atmosphere was tense, filled with suspicion and distrust. The once harmonious community was now fractured, torn apart by greed and power struggles. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and they were beginning to sprout. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, 2 black SUVs pulled up to my house. 2 men in dark suits emerged, flashing badges that read, Federal Bureau of Investigation. My heart leaped into my throat. What could the FBI possibly want with me? They introduced themselves as Agents Miller and Davies and explained they were investigating the Osprey Island Homeowners Association for potential fraud and embezzlement. They had been following my lawsuit and were interested in the evidence I had gathered. I was stunned. I had suspected the HOA was corrupt, but I never imagined it would attract the attention of the FBI. A wave of relief washed over me, followed by a surge of cautious optimism. Could this be the breakthrough we needed? I invited them inside, my mind racing. I showed them the documents I had collected, explained my suspicions, and shared the stories of the homeowners who had been victimized by the HOA. They listened intently, asking probing questions, taking detailed notes. I was hesitant at first, unsure if I could trust them. But as they explained the scope of their investigation and the potential consequences for the HOA, I realized they were our best hope. I decided to cooperate fully, providing them with everything I had, trusting that they would finally bring justice to Osprey Island. This unexpected turn of events offered a glimmer of hope in the darkness, a chance to finally expose the truth and help my brother. Working with the FBI, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place with alarming clarity. The investigation revealed a complex web of financial crimes far beyond what I had initially suspected. The HOA president, Mr. Harrison, and several other board members were involved in a sophisticated scheme to embezzle funds from the community. They had been siphoning money into offshore accounts, creating fake invoices, and awarding contracts to shell corporations in exchange for kickbacks. The bridge demolition, it turned out, was not just about control or petty grievances, it was a deliberate attempt to cover up their tracks. The old bridge had been scheduled for a routine inspection, which likely would have revealed structural problems and triggered a more thorough audit of the HOA's finances. By demolishing the bridge and awarding a lucrative contract to Mr. Harrison's brother-in-law, they could bury the evidence and enrich themselves in the process. The FBI also discovered that the HOA had been deliberately suppressing dissent, using intimidation tactics and smear campaigns to silence anyone who questioned their authority. Ben's refusal to comply with their demands had made him a target, and the bridge demolition was a way to punish him and send a message to the rest of the community. The depth of their corruption was staggering, a betrayal of the trust placed in them by the homeowners of Osprey Island. The truth was far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. While I was battling the HOA and the FBI was unraveling their criminal enterprise, Ben was fighting his own battle for survival on Osprey Island. His radio calls, though infrequent and often garbled, painted a picture of resilience and ingenuity in the face of adversity. He had started fishing, supplementing his dwindling food supply with whatever he could catch from the surrounding waters. He rigged up a makeshift rainwater collection system, ensuring a steady supply of fresh water even if the generator failed. He even repurposed driftwood and salvaged materials to repair his cottage, reinforcing it against the elements. His creativity, usually channeled into his art, was now focused on survival. He fashioned tools from scraps of metal, built traps for small animals, and learned to identify edible plants. He was drawing on a deep well of resourcefulness, proving that he was more than just an artist, he was a survivor. But the isolation was taking its toll. He missed human contact, the simple pleasures of life, the comfort of knowing he wasn't alone. He spoke of the loneliness, the long nights filled with worry, the gnawing fear that he might be forgotten. Yet, even in his darkest moments, he never lost hope. He knew I was fighting for him, and that knowledge gave him the strength to keep going. His quiet determination was an inspiration, a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure even the most challenging circumstances. The combined weight of the FBI's investigation and my lawsuit began to take its toll on the HOA. The carefully constructed facade of respectability started to crumble, exposing the rot beneath. As details of the corruption and embezzlement scheme leaked to the press, public opinion began to shift dramatically. Local news outlets picked up the story, highlighting Ben's plight and the HOA's callous disregard for his well-being. The community, once divided, started to rally around him. Homeowners who had previously been afraid to speak out now voiced their outrage, demanding accountability and justice. The pressure on the HOA intensified. Their meetings became chaotic, filled with angry residents demanding answers. The board members, once arrogant and dismissive, now appeared nervous and defensive. They tried to deflect blame, deny wrongdoing, and downplay the severity of the situation, but their efforts were futile. The evidence was overwhelming, and the public was no longer buying their lies. Even some of their staunchest supporters began to waver, realizing they had been duped. The tide was turning, and the HOA was losing its grip on power. The truth was finally coming to light, and those responsible for the bridge demolition and the years of corruption were about to face the consequences of their actions. Ben's isolation had inadvertently sparked a revolution within the community, a fight for justice and accountability that was long overdue. The next HOA meeting was a powder keg waiting to explode. The room was packed, the air thick with anger and resentment. Every eye was fixed on the HOA board members, who sat at the head table, looking pale and uncomfortable under the intense scrutiny. Accusations flew like poison darts. Homeowners, emboldened by the evidence uncovered by the FBI and my investigation, confronted the board members with their crimes. They demanded answers, accountability, and resignations. The meeting quickly devolved into a shouting match, a chaotic scene of accusations and denials. I stepped forward, armed with copies of the financial documents, contracts, and emails that proved the HOA's guilt. I presented the evidence calmly and methodically, laying out the facts for everyone to see. The silence in the room was deafening as I detailed the embezzlement scheme, the kickbacks, and the deliberate destruction of the bridge. Then, one by one, other homeowners rose to share their stories. An elderly woman recounted how the HOA had denied her request for a handicap ramp, citing budget constraints, while simultaneously funneling money into offshore accounts. A young family described how they had been threatened with fines for minor landscaping violations, while the HOA president's lawn remained perfectly manicured at the community's expense. Their emotional testimonies painted a devastating picture of greed, abuse of power, and betrayal of trust. The confrontation was cathartic, a release of pent-up anger and frustration. The HOA's reign of terror was finally coming to an end. The arrests came swiftly and decisively. The FBI, acting on the evidence gathered during their investigation, descended on Osprey Island and took key members of the HOA into custody. Mr. Harrison, the HOA president, was led away in handcuffs, his face pale and drawn. Other board members, implicated in the scheme, followed suit. The charges were serious: fraud, embezzlement, and potentially obstruction of justice. The FBI alleged that the HOA members had siphoned off hundreds of thousands of dollars from the community, using the funds for personal gain and to silence dissent. The bridge demolition was cited as a key example of their abuse of power, a deliberate act of retaliation and a blatant attempt to cover up their crimes. The news of the arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Some homeowners cheered, celebrating the downfall of the corrupt regime. Others were stunned, struggling to reconcile the image of their neighbors with the reality of their crimes. For me, the arrests were a bittersweet victory. While I was relieved that the HOA members were finally being held accountable, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness for the community that had been torn apart by their greed and corruption. But more than anything, I felt a surge of hope. The arrests marked a turning point, a chance for Osprey Island to heal and rebuild, to create a community based on fairness, transparency, and trust. And, most importantly, it meant that Ben would finally be able to return to his life, to his home, to his art. The arrests were just the beginning. The real work lay ahead, rebuilding the bridge, both literally and figuratively. The community, energized by the newfound sense of hope and unity, rallied together to make it happen. Volunteers from all walks of life pitched in, donating their time, skills, and resources. Carpenters, engineers, and construction workers offered their expertise, while local businesses provided materials and equipment at cost. Fundraising efforts were launched, and donations poured in from across the state. The rebuilding of the bridge became a symbol of resilience, a testament to the community's ability to overcome adversity. It was a tangible expression of their determination to create a better future, one based on fairness, transparency, and collaboration. The day the bridge was finally completed was a day of celebration. The entire community gathered to witness the ribbon-cutting ceremony, their faces beaming with pride and joy. And then, the moment we had all been waiting for, Ben's return. As he drove across the newly constructed bridge in his old pickup truck, a wave of emotion washed over me. Tears streamed down my face as I watched him step out of the truck, his eyes scanning the crowd, searching for me. We embraced tightly, a silent acknowledgement of all we had been through, all we had overcome. He was home. Osprey Island was whole again. The lifeline was restored. With Ben safely back on Osprey Island and the bridge rebuilt, the focus shifted to the legal proceedings against the former HOA members. The wheels of justice turned slowly, grinding through a mountain of evidence, legal motions, and procedural delays. The former HOA members, now facing serious prison sentences and financial ruin, fought back fiercely. They hired expensive lawyers, filed appeals, and tried to shift the blame onto each other. They attempted to discredit witnesses, suppress evidence, and delay the proceedings as much as possible. The trial was a long and arduous process, lasting for months. I, along with other homeowners, testified about the HOA's corruption, their abuse of power, and the devastating impact their actions had on the community. Ms. Evans, my lawyer, skillfully presented the evidence, dismantling the HOA's defense piece by piece. The former HOA members tried to portray themselves as victims, claiming they had acted in the best interests of the community and had been unfairly targeted by a disgruntled minority. But their lies were transparent, their excuses hollow. The evidence was overwhelming, and the jury saw through their deception. The fight for justice was far from over, but we were one step closer to holding them accountable for their crimes. The day the sentences were handed down was a day of reckoning. After months of legal wrangling, the former HOA members finally faced the consequences of their actions. Mr. Harrison, the ringleader of the scheme, received the harshest sentence, a lengthy prison term and a hefty fine. The other board members received varying sentences, depending on their level of involvement in the crimes. Accountability was finally established. The message was clear: those who abuse their power and betray the trust of their community will be held responsible. The sentences brought a sense of closure to the residents of Osprey Island, allowing them to finally move forward. The healing process began slowly, tentatively. The community, scarred by the HOA's corruption, needed time to rebuild trust and mend broken relationships. The new HOA, formed by a group of dedicated homeowners committed to transparency and fairness, worked tirelessly to restore faith in the community's governing body. Community events were organized, bringing residents together to celebrate their shared values and rebuild their sense of belonging. Open forums were held, allowing homeowners to voice their concerns and participate in the decision-making process. Slowly, cautiously, the wounds began to heal. The scars remained, a reminder of the community's past struggles, but they also served as a testament to their resilience and their determination to create a better future. Osprey Island was finally on the path to recovery, a stronger and more united community than ever before. The foundation for a truly new beginning on Osprey Island was the formation of a completely restructured HOA. This wasn't just a reshuffling of faces, it was a fundamental shift in the organization's purpose and operation. The new HOA was built on the principles of transparency, accountability, and community involvement. The bylaws were rewritten to ensure that all financial records were open to public scrutiny, that contracts were awarded through a competitive bidding process, and that all homeowners had a voice in the decision-making process. Regular town hall meetings were held, providing a platform for residents to express their concerns and offer suggestions. Committees were formed to address specific issues, such as bridge maintenance, landscaping, and community events. These committees were composed of volunteers from diverse backgrounds, ensuring that a wide range of perspectives were considered. Ethical governance became the guiding principle. All HOA board members were required to undergo ethics training, and strict conflict of interest rules were implemented. The focus shifted from control and regulation to collaboration and community building. The new HOA was not just a governing body, it was a vehicle for fostering a sense of belonging, promoting shared values, and creating a vibrant and thriving community. Osprey Island was finally on the path to becoming the paradise it was always meant to be, a place where neighbors work together to create a better future for themselves and for generations to come. For Ben, life slowly began to return to normal. The trauma of his isolation and the battle with the HOA left its mark, but he emerged from the ordeal stronger and more resilient. He resumed his art, his hands finding solace in the familiar act of shaping wood into beautiful creations. His work took on a new depth, reflecting the lessons he had learned about community, resilience, and the importance of standing up for what is right. He became more involved in the community, attending HOA meetings, volunteering his time, and offering his unique perspective to the decision-making process. He even used his artistic talents to design a new welcome sign for Osprey Island, a symbol of unity and hope. The experience also deepened his appreciation for family. He realized how much he relied on me, his sister, and how much our bond meant to him. We spent more time together, sharing stories, laughing, and simply enjoying each other's company. He learned to value the simple things in life: a warm meal, a comfortable bed, human connection. He realized that material possessions were less important than relationships, community, and a sense of purpose. Ben's future was bright, filled with hope, gratitude, and a renewed commitment to living a life of meaning and purpose. The scars of the past remained, but they served as a reminder of his strength, his resilience, and his unwavering spirit. Looking back on the events of the past year, I am filled with a mixture of emotions: sadness, anger, relief, and above all, gratitude. It was a long and arduous journey, filled with challenges, setbacks, and moments of despair. I made sacrifices, neglecting my own life and well-being to fight for my brother and the community of Osprey Island. But I also discovered a strength within myself that I never knew existed. I learned that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one person can make a difference. I witnessed the power of community, the resilience of the human spirit, and the importance of standing up for what is right. The experience changed me in profound ways. I became more aware of the injustices that exist in the world, more committed to fighting for fairness and equality, and more appreciative of the bonds that connect us to one another. The story of Osprey Island is a story of hope and perseverance. It is a reminder that even when darkness seems to prevail, light can emerge. It is a testament to the power of community, the importance of family, and the unwavering spirit of those who refuse to give up. And it is a message to anyone facing adversity: you are not alone. There is strength within you, and there is always hope for a better tomorrow. Never give up, never lose faith, and never stop fighting for what you believe in.